Without telling us, the in-laws moved into our house. Suddenly a large amount of luggage was brought in, and immediately after, the in-laws showed their faces from the entrance and called out to us. I have no intention of paying rent. And by the way, I can't help with the chores, so please do them all for me. I want a spacious room. Please help with moving my stuff. I was shocked by their sudden appearance, and even more by what they said. My father-in-law and brother-in-law invaded our house and demanded help with the move. Their absurd behavior made me laugh. Of course, that's fine, I replied with a smile, and immediately called my husband to inform him of the situation. If he finishes work at the usual time, he should be home soon. I was curious to see how he would react to this scene. The ones who mocked and ridiculed me were the in-laws. While thinking about that, my husband returned home. As expected, my father-in-law and brother-in-law were scolded by him. But after that, I saw the documents he showed to the two of them and couldn't help but smirk. You can use this apartment however you like, he told them that, and as a result, I left this apartment. My name is Isla Moner. I am 34 years old and work from home. Considering my parents' situation, I chose a job that allowed me to work from home. Working from home makes it easy to do housework, and I can easily search for recipes when cooking. I met my husband, Henry Moner, during the time when that particular virus was spreading. I had no chances for new encounters in my environment, so we met on a dating app. Henry is 35 years old and works as a carpenter. He often travels for work, so our time together was much less compared to other couples. Still, Henry wanted to live with me, a gesture of kindness so I wouldn't feel lonely. I was quickly captivated by that sentiment and started thinking about marriage. Already past 30, I wanted to have a child soon, considering my age. However, due to menstrual irregularities from a young age, I struggled to get pregnant. Henry always supported me, saying, "It can't be helped," but I couldn't help but hope and expect every time. I had been told by an OB/GYN that the path to pregnancy would be challenging. I tearfully shared this with Henry, and just talking to him made me feel a bit better. I don't know how much I burdened Henry, but thinking of how he cares for me, I slowly came to terms with our situation. We decided to live happily together. Given the current situation, where an unidentified infectious disease is spreading, we vowed to live joyfully together. But one day, we got a call from Henry's father, Mr. Eli Moner. He complained about us getting married without greeting them, and for the first time, I saw Henry get frustrated. I'm glad I was able to greet Eli's parents properly, but if Phila meets my father, I think you'd feel uncomfortable. Really? Is he that troublesome? Still, I think we should at least greet your father. You're right. Then let's visit my father's house just once to greet them. It was clear from Henry's expression that he didn't want to see his father. But even with a frown, he started preparing to visit his father's place. However, Henry kept mumbling, "I don't want to see him, and I don't want to go." It's so unlike the gentle Henry. He must really not want to meet him. I could imagine how much he disliked his father. Nevertheless, when I suggested bringing something as a gift, he reluctantly agreed. What on earth happened between Henry and his father? It would be great to know, but Henry didn't want to talk about his past. He probably didn't even want to think about it. I'm not the type to force someone to talk about something they don't want to discuss, but seeing how much he despised his home, I wanted to listen. Yet, we were about to head to Henry's father's place. I had a feeling somewhere deep down that someone would say something unpleasant to me, so I braced myself and left the house. I'm prone to stress and sometimes get stomach aches. Henry cared for and genuinely worried about me because of this. Are you okay? We can do this some other time if you want. Yes, let's go. We should at least greet them. It would be rude not to, especially to my father-in-law. It was my father-in-law who went out of his way to call and complain. He didn't seem like he would easily forgive us. If anything, he seemed a bit bothersome. Henry seemed to have the same impression and offered to drive. It seemed like he was trying to distract himself by driving. It made me feel like there must have been some past issues with his family. Although I'm hesitant about meeting my father-in-law, I don't regret choosing Henry. I adore his kindness towards me, and even his slight clumsiness. Even if our relationship with the father-in-law causes issues, we'll just have to overcome them. Lost in thought, we arrived at Henry's family house before I knew it. Our apartment isn't too far from the place. If we tried, we could walk there. Upon our arrival, my father-in-law greeted us with a smile. However, Henry gave him a glaring look and entered the house. Suddenly, a loud voice echoed from the back of the room. How many times have I told you, relying on your father has its limits. You should be independent. How old do you think you are? Shut up, you probably don't even care about me. It seems Scott is Henry's younger brother. Scott, the younger brother, responded defiantly to Henry. From their argument, I gathered that Scott has been unemployed since his late 20s. It doesn't seem like he's unwell. While he wants to find a job that suits him, he always seems to find some excuse not to. Henry seems disgusted by this. This apartment, however small, is meant for the two of us. If all four of us were to live together, we'd need to find a new place. I'll take the room on the second floor. Isla, can you clean this room for me? My father-in-law, on the other hand, keeps bringing different women into his home, only to break up with them later. Henry didn't agree with this either. I'm not your guardian. I just came to tell you about my marriage to Isla. Oh, got it, LOL. But if you're here to show off, then go somewhere else. Living with Dad is enough for me. Scott, laughing, was engrossed in a video game. Henry was getting irritated, but then I noticed my father-in-law silently watching us. Isla, was it? If you're taking Henry's surname, you understand that you'll also have to help with our living situation, right? When you get married, you become a part of this family. I understand your feelings, but I don't think it should be forced. What are you saying, young lady? Don't you know how to respect your elders? Do I need to teach you how to behave towards those older than you? Suddenly, I was snapped back to reality by his loud voice. At that moment, Henry grabbed my hand and took me out of the house. I was terrified of my father-in-law, who was chasing after us with a face filled with rage. I felt something off about this family. My body couldn't stop shaking from that sensation. Come to think of it, Our new apartment's address was revealed because my father-in-law decided on it without our input. To avoid living in constant fear, we decided to move. Fortunately, I work from home, so as long as I have a computer, I can work anywhere. But the problem is Henry's job. Henry is both a carpenter and a business owner, so he's busy and often travels for work. So I decided to handle the moving preparations while cutting back on my work. While living in this apartment, we never know when my father-in-law and brother-in-law might visit. I, who often have bad premonitions come true, could only hope that the worst wouldn't happen. While thinking about such things, I proceeded with the moving arrangements with a strong desire to leave here as soon as possible. I wanted to have everything settled before those two came to visit. With the moving process completed, I was finally able to resume remote work. Today, I had to contact the person in charge about a job from the owner I had been relying on for a while. As I was on the phone discussing work, suddenly the doorbell rang. Who could it be? Henry. But if it were him, he would just come in on his own. Could it be my father-in-law and brother-in-law? As I was contemplating this, I heard a familiar voice shouting from behind the front door. It's Eli. What should I do? Henry hasn't returned from work yet. I can't just ignore them, so I should at least try talking to them. I finished my call with the client and walked towards the front door. At the same time, I could hear someone knocking on the door forcefully. It was undoubtedly my father-in-law on the other side. I didn't know why he had come, but if he intended to disrupt our peaceful life, I wanted him to leave. I greeted them and lightly opened the door. My brother-in-law, with a big bag, forced the door open and placed it in the hallway with a big grin on his face. We moved here because we had to sell the previous house due to tight loan payments, so we're getting ready to move in. Of course, we won't pay rent or do any housework, so please take care of that. My father-in-law and brother-in-law had a nerve to enter our apartment without permission. My brother-in-law immediately picked up his belongings and wandered around the apartment, trying to find the best spot. My father-in-law, after placing his heavy bag on the living room floor, complained about the lack of space and the mess. The living room is cluttered with stuff before you even started cleaning. There's no space for 4 people to have a meal together. I was utterly speechless at their selfish behavior. I contacted Henry and explained the situation to him. I could hear him pounding the wall on the other side of the phone. He seemed quite angry. However, what Henry said afterward made me feel relieved. At least, it seemed that we wouldn't have to take care of these two. However, Henry was still busy with work and couldn't return to the apartment. Therefore, it was my role to deal with this situation. But facing 2 men alone as a woman was daunting, so I contacted someone. That person's name was Nicole Young. She had helped us when Henry and I were planning the move, and lived in the building constructed by Henry's company. Furthermore, she was the president of a company that managed real estate, even overseas. When I explained the situation to her, she muttered, "I have a bad feeling about those two who are visiting your home." In the midst of this, as expected, the 2 of them began spreading their belongings everywhere, with innocent smiles. This apartment is owned by Henry and me, and I'm the leaseholder. They didn't even know this, and they were behaving recklessly. From my perspective, Their actions were incomprehensible and unacceptable. Rent, housework, don't worry about it. We're actually planning to leave this place. Upon hearing my words, my father-in-law panicked and reached out to me. It was a pitiable sight. As I looked down on him with a cold gaze, my father-in-law desperately shouted, "Is this a joke? Come on, tell me it's just a joke." "It's true, Eli." Henry and I discussed this and made a proper decision. Besides, this isn't the time for such jokes. The man who had been complaining in the living room just a while ago was now clinging to me, looking utterly pitiful. I had something to say to my brother-in-law as well. His actions, from the moment he entered our house, searching for his own room, had made me angry. How could he act so selfishly, without even a contract in his name? From my perspective, all his actions were incomprehensible and entirely unforgivable. It's unthinkable for you to barge into this house on your own. You don't even have a contract, so why do you think you can move and start living here? So I decided to have Nicole come over. She was the owner and manager of this apartment. She was sometimes referred to as the president and seen as an office worker by others. In other words, she was quite well known in the community. Once she arrived, any further excuses would be meaningless. Nicole parked her car in the parking space and entered the room. She seemed to have grasped the situation between me and the two men and understood the circumstances to some extent. Then, she contacted Henry. After a while, it seemed Nicole had finished talking to Henry over the phone. Her expression had turned serious. "Mr. Moner, I heard you sold your family home. Have you completed the tax declaration procedures at the municipal office?" "No, I haven't touched that yet." "That's a problem. In that case, it will be difficult for us to rent this apartment to you. Let's discuss renting this place after you properly complete the procedures at the municipal office." Nicole's words were straightforward. It seemed that someone with legal knowledge like her would handle discussing with difficult men like my father-in-law better. However, on the other hand, Henry should also understand my father-in-law's difficult personality. In fact, Henry had revealed a certain conversation to me before his business trip. It was a topic he didn't want to touch as much as possible, but probably because my father-in-law was unaware of his past mistakes, and he was being considerate. My father-in-law had a history of infidelity and selfishness, and he had relationships with other women even before Henry's mother left the house. When confronted with this fact, my father-in-law had retaliated and told Henry's mother to leave with the words, "You should leave." Henry's mother had hugged him with a heartfelt apology, then said, "I'm sorry," and left the house. And Henry started to take over the housework, trying to replace his mother, but his father-in-law's problematic behavior only increased. Furthermore, Scott frequently changed jobs and ended up becoming unemployed at the age of 28. While receiving welfare, Scott became a shut-in, and dealing with him and their father became too much, so Henry decided to marry me. They seemed to be paying for utilities, but it appeared that they handled other expenses like insurance premiums haphazardly. And it seemed like Henry noticed that continuing to repay the house loan was doubtful. Unable to bear this situation, Henry chose a life with me as a couple. It seemed like Nicole and the father-in-law were constantly arguing. Then, a message from Henry came in. I decided to intervene and convey the message between Nicole and the father-in-law. "Excuse me, Eli, I hate to interrupt your conversation, but Henry and I have decided to leave this apartment tomorrow." "Wait a minute. What are you talking about? I haven't heard anything from Henry. Shouldn't a real father be informed when moving out? Henry doesn't want to talk to you. He thinks it's better to distance himself from a self-centered father who's a habitual cheater, and from his brother Scott." Then I showed the father-in-law the message from Henry. In our exchanged messages, there were words from Henry expressing his dissatisfaction with his father. I just listened and accepted it, but based on what I heard from Henry, my image of the father-in-law is not positive. When we visited the father-in-law's home and greeted them, and even their behavior today, it's clear they lack common sense. And it seems they don't realize their own unreasonable actions. From what I've seen, I can tell that these two aren't up to much. The father-in-law, who seemed puzzled, was supplemented by Nicole. "Even if Philo were to leave, if you haven't filed a tax return for the home sale, even renting an apartment would be impossible. Even so, I have cash here. Wouldn't that work out? That's not the point. Just because you gave up your house doesn't mean it's over. If you neglect to file a tax return, you'll be penalized. Ultimately, the one who will lose out is you, Mr. Moner. Are you still okay with that?" One would want to be accurate in procedures when continuously operating in the real estate business. Information about the sold house must be reported to the IRS sooner or later. I even doubt whether they've properly contacted the real estate agent. Given the nature of this father and son, it seems highly likely they didn't even bother to check properly. According to the documents provided by Nicole, it seems that tax payments are also required. I wonder if the two of them even understand the tax payment procedures. According to Nicole, the father-in-law showed her these documents about the apartment right away. But he doesn't seem to understand the content, and both the father-in-law and Scott keep asking questions about the documents. I wonder where to start explaining so they can understand. Although Henry and I haven't been living in this apartment for very long, we researched and understood how to proceed with the procedures ourselves. I think this is a matter of course, and most people can process smoothly. If you don't research everything, you won't know the pros and cons. I think it's natural to check. Still, I really can't understand them, who moved without checking anything. Do these two really not realize their lack of common sense? While thinking that, Nicole gave them a final reminder. Please don't assume you can move into this apartment right away. Once all the verifications are done, we will consult with you again. At that time, let's discuss the future. Understood. It seems Scott also accepted Nicole's words, as he sat quietly, without commenting. With advice from Nicole. To avoid getting wrapped up in unreasonable actions in the future, we decided to rent this apartment to the father-in-law and Scott, who have nowhere to live. Even so, we have to live in this apartment until tomorrow. Just in case, I decided to return to my parents' home. Even if it's just for one night, I have reservations about spending it with two men, and considering their irrational actions, it would be troublesome if something happened. If I caused any trouble myself, it would jeopardize the new life with Henry. So I entrusted everything to Nicole, the real estate professional, and decided to spend the day in peace at my parents' home. Since the father-in-law and Scott will be staying at the apartment, Henry and I decided to prepare for our new home. We decided to get information about the two of them from Nicole in the future. Later on, due to Nicole's consideration, the apartment was rented out for a few days to Eli Moner and Scott Moner. This was for various checks related to the sale of the house, including carrying out procedures and paying taxes. Upon further investigation into the in-laws' house, as expected, they hadn't completed the post-sale procedures. On top of that, they hadn't paid their taxes, and there were even suspicions that they embezzled the money they earned from the sale. Nicole, suspecting fraud, reported it to the police. Eli Moner and Scott, who were living in the apartment, were informed of this reality. Due to providing false information to the real estate company, they would definitely face penalties. Plus, considering the unpaid taxes, it was uncertain how much money they would have left. According to Nicole, the amount left might end up being negative. This is because the real estate company they used for the house appraisal was the only one with good word-of-mouth reviews. They found it bothersome to get appraisals from multiple companies and assumed the value wouldn't change even if they did. After selling a house, the transfer of ownership registration must be done. Simply put, it's a procedure to change the name from Eli Moner to the new owner. Normally, if there's a remaining loan on the house, it's customary to pay it from the selling price. However, as Henry had predicted, he had left the loan unpaid. With the adjustment of the payment, and also considering the potential fraud, the police started their investigation, casting a dark shadow on Eli's future. Despite all this, Eli kept insisting that he knew nothing. As for Scott, he couldn't return to his previous home, nor could he live in the apartment we rented. The only option left for him was to find a job that came with an employee housing. However, due to his long history of being a shut-in and his complete dependence on his father, this was challenging. In the end, my parents decided to take him in. However, the condition was that he would leave as soon as he found a job with an employee housing. Urged to leave soon but under the guidance of my parents, it seemed he would eventually find employment. All we hope for now is for Eli and Scott to lead sincere lives. It became evident how crucial it is to research and act by ourselves, no matter how trivial the matter. On the other hand, Henry and I found a new place to live abroad. Henry's work was recognized, and he received a job offer overseas. But there was one problem: neither of us spoke French, so we worked hard to learn French conversation. We were eager to converse in everyday situations as soon as possible. And more than anything, we were excited about our first overseas life. Since the job shifted overseas, Henry went ahead to search for a new home. Regular messages and calls from him eased my worries, making me feel fortunate. And today, I'm at the airport, ready to board a plane to France. Henry, who was concerned about me traveling alone, gave me a call. "Are you okay? I feel bad for all the trouble my father and brother caused you." "I'm fine, really. I can't help but look forward to living abroad with you. Really, that's a relief." Hearing Henry's relieved voice, I felt happiness. From now on, without those two getting in our way, we'll enjoy our life together. We'll study a lot to understand new things and adapt to life abroad. That's perfect. And so our life overseas began. Eventually, a child was born to our family, and a new chapter began for our family of 3. While cherishing the happiness of spending time with the family, we continue to live vibrantly,